Let's make a start then. So thank you all for joining today to the UEA Dementia Open Forum. So it's my great pleasure to have Alpar Lazar with us today. So Alpar is an associate professor at the School of Health Sciences here at UEA. And he's also the lead of the Sleep and Brain Research Laboratory. And so Alpar is going to talk about his sleep research, well, sleep in general, and his sleep research. So if I could just ask you to stay on mute during the talk, and then afterwards we have time. Either you can come on or you can type your questions into the chat. So over to you, Alpar.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Can you just let me know, Michael, whether you can see the full screen?
Yeah, I can see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, everyone. I mean, Michael asked me to give a little bit of insight into the sleep and dementia research domain in the chicken or egg question, but we will discuss a little bit more in details later on. Obviously I realize that it's a very limited time, so it's going to be probably a relatively high altitude, but of course please feel free to stop me or just at the end ask questions if obviously I will omit important details. So we all know how important is sleep in our life. We all know how it is when we wake up refreshed, and really experience everyone that a good day and a productive day starts with a good night's sleep. And we also know when that doesn't happen, and then we have to actually wake up earlier, and then we carry on that in sleep debt in a way which is going to have a mark on our daily activities. And we may actually need to take a naps, and we shouldn't forget that there are cultures where people actually take pride of taking naps during the day to increase work productivity in some Asian countries. Now, it's a quite good question. If you ask a sleep scientist how important is sleep, probably everybody, all sleep scientists will emphasize very much the importance of sleep, and probably couldn't ignore the fact that we may be a little bit biased. So it's particularly interesting if we ask, lay people, everyday people, and ask opinions about the importance of sleep in everyday life. And there was an interesting research in this context commissioned by Sainsbury's and performed by Oxford Economics, where they tried to understand the well-being of the nation in the UK, tried to come up with a kind of a new index based on questionnaires on quality of life. And in one of their analyses, it was a national representative sample, and in one of their analyses, they compared top quality of life, people reporting top quality of life with average quality of life. And then they ranked the factors that contributed to the variance, to the classification. And you can see here the importance of those features. And it was probably surprising for everyone there that sleep quality came up on the top of the ranking. If you look through the list, obviously they all make sense. They are important for our well-being, but it appears that good sleep quality has the strongest association with well-being. When they repeated the analysis comparing top quality with like bottom, really the worst one, is still sleep quality top the ranking, but the ranking otherwise the order changed regarding the other factors. Now, of course, sleep is not only important for our quality of life. If we look at something that we are really concerned in everyday life because it has an implication for our health and also our outlook, like our BMI, has been shown in large sample size studies to be associated with sleep duration. As you can see here, sleep duration in during both rest days and free days is negatively associated with sleep duration, with the shorter sleep than 6 hours, really increasing the risk quite a bit for obesity. Now, this is not very surprising if you know a bit about sleep in animals and in mammals particularly, because we can clearly see a similar association between body size and body weight, but only herbivores. And there, of course, it makes quite a bit of sense because plants are low-caloric food diet, and therefore probably the animals which require quite a bit of energy to sustain their organism on a daily basis, they require lots of time to spend eating. Now, this is shouldn't be the case in humans because we are not, herbivores. We are omnivores, and we still see this association. Of course, there are lots of theories and there's evidence indicating not a pure association, but also mechanistic relationship between sleep duration and metabolism. We won't go into those details now. But we are particularly interested in mental health. We are interested in cognitions. And here you can see a relatively recent large sample size study from UK Biobank showing a nonlinear quadratic association between outcome measures of mental health and as well as cognition with sleep duration. Now, it's a common pattern here that it's a U-shaped or inverted U-shaped association where both short and long sleep appear to be associated with worse outcomes, whether we are talking about mental health or cognition, and then we can also see some outcome measures of cortical volume and cortical thickness. Now there are some sex differences, but that's now not an important point for our discussion. If we look into sleep duration changes across aging, and we separate sleep duration as measured during work days and free days, it's striking. There's a striking difference. What we can see here that sleep duration decreases only when measured during free days, where there's no much change throughout the lifetime, adult lifespan during work days. But of course, it also makes lots of sense because our work schedule won't change with aging too much, whereas our biological need for sleep, which is best reflected during free days, is going to change. And this is the dynamics, what you can see. Now, of course, it's also beyond our research topic here, but you can immediately see that there's quite a bit of social sleep restriction or jet lag effect during the early adulthood when the discrepancy between work days and rest days can be quite marked, quite considerable, in a way suggesting that we carry on a sleep that's throughout the week. We try to dissipate during the weekend, the rest days. But why I show this figure is that there are other figures as well, which from larger data sets, where we show a similar decline in cognition across multiple cognitive areas with aging. Here you can see a very famous figure from Salthauser, where you can see that reasoning, spatial visualization, memory, and cognitive speed, they all decline, except vocabulary knowledge. So in a way, lexical knowledge that doesn't decline, that even increases because we know more and more as we grow older. But somehow still the hardware of the brain shows a decline with aging. Now, this slope is somewhat similar between sleep duration and cognition. And the question is, of course, could be that there is an association between the two, and if there is an association between the two, is that just an epiphenomenon, that there's a common reason for both, or there's a causality between the two factors, and if yes, which comes first? Now, there are plenty of evidence indicating that sleep actually has a causality in our cognition, and I like to cite this old study, but which showed for the first time that sleep duration and cognition present a dose-dependent relationship. So what in this experiment they did, they had a group of healthy young people who, after several days and nights of baseline sleep, They were randomized into multiple groups of 8 hours sleep, 6, 4, and no sleep at all for several days. And then they, of course, administered various cognitive assessments. This is just one example, which is a symbol digit substitution test. Probably you are all familiar with that. It is relatively sensitive to the effects of sleep loss, but also general brain disorder. Now, here are the results. What they found is that those people who had the opportunity to sleep 8 hours, which would be, let's say, the normal sleep opportunity per day, they gradually improved in their performance, where depending on the sleep opportunity, that change in performance gradually declined in a dose-dependent manner. So it's almost like, we could almost say that it's almost like a pill. The more you take, the more sleep you have, the better is going to be your cognitive performance. Of course, sleep is also critical for other cognitive functions. Here, I just would like to highlight memory and learning in general. So there's evidence showing that sleep is necessary in a way for the brain to learn new information. And this is just a result from a research where they looked at the effect of sleep deprivation on encoding emotionally neutral or positive negative stimulus type. And you can see that overall there's a clear effect where with sleep deprivation decreasing the encoding efficiency on the following day. But we can also see that there is some modulation of the emotional tone or balance of those stimuli, with the positive ones being more effective compared to the negatives. Of course, we won't go into these details either, but you could almost immediately think of the implications for mental health. If we don't sleep well, then we will actually consolidate more negative than positive stimuli. Of course, sleep hasn't got only a role in encoding new memories, but also in consolidating learned memories. And we know from the systems memory consolidation theory that sleep has a role in transferring those memory traces from the hippocampus into the long-term neocortex. Of course, there's lots of research in this field, and it's continuously evolving, and there are debates on which sleep stage is more important for this process. But overall, the phenomenon is briefly that the hippocampus is critical in integrating the information in various neocortical regions. And then if there's a retrieval cue, the retrieval actually were pretty much dependent on the hippocampus. Whereas later on with consolidation, this becomes independent of the hippocampus. And this process is pretty much served by a coalescence of oscillations happening during sleep, which transfer the memory through the ripples, hippocampal ripples, with the mediation of the thalamocortical spindles to the cortex, where is basically the call signal as represented by the neocortical slow waves. If we were to summarize the functions of sleep on our brain, there would be two large categories. One would be related to neuroplasticity and memory formation, whereas evidence shows that sleep has a role in recalibrating synaptic strengths, promoting dendritic spine formation, transferring the actual memory traces, as we just discussed, from the short-term to the long-term distributed neural networks, and there's a consolidation or reconsolidation of these memory traces. Now, it's also very important that sleep has a role in general recovery, and we know that one of the major physiological role of sleep is restoration and recovery from a cellular metabolic point of view. We have lots of energy macromolecules like ATP molecules that we continuously use for our neurons firing, which obviously become metabolized, and there's adenosine accumulation in the interstitial fluid, which obviously is going to act as a neuromodulator, maybe will make us tired. But many of these metabolites can be toxic as well, just as beta amyloids. And there's strong evidence now showing that the clearance of the metabolites during what we accumulate during sleep, during wake, are more effectively cleared out through the lymphatic system during sleep. Now, knowing all these functions of sleep, it can become quite worrying that, well, since the advent of artificial light, we live in an electrically illuminated 24/7, 52 world, meaning that if we have to work a lot, and if we want to socialize as well, then probably sleep is going to be the program that we are going to reduce, and the behavior that's going to and functions that's going to be affected the most. And this is not a trivial problem. It has, because insufficient sleep seems to be and it's been already considered like a public health problem in the US. And of course, the numbers of chronic sleep disorders are quite prevalent in our society, with evidence showing a clear link with various negative health outcomes, as you can see here. But of course, we are particularly interested in the association of sleep impairment with neurodegeneration and dementia. Well, evidence shows that sleep disorders are prevalent in dementia. So this all comes from the clinical observations, and probably we all experience, if we have whoever met patients with dementia, that they mostly are struck by sleep disorders. Now here you can see the prevalence of various sleep disorders. This is basically, these bars are the overall sleep disorders in various dementia conditions, indicating that, for example, in Alzheimer's disease, there's almost a 70% prevalence of sleep disorders, whereas in Parkinson's disease dementia, Lewy body dementia, there is a much higher, it's almost 90% prevalence. Now, if we were to discuss a bit about the subtypes of sleep disorders, we could see that insomnia and sleep disordered breathing are the most common ones. And also excessive daytime sleepiness is quite common. And this is, I'm not going to show for all, but this pattern is very similar across dementia disorders, with the only difference that in Parkinson's dementia and Lewy body dementia, generally the REM behavior disorder is also quite common. A recent meta-analysis pulling together objectively measured sleep data from dementia patients indicate that the difference. So there are various sleep architectural differences associated with dementia, such as a reduction in slow wave sleep, in REM sleep, an increasing number of awakenings, and overall decrease in sleep efficiency. Here you can see that the decrease in slow wave sleep and REM sleep has a clear association also with the Mini-Mental score in this population. But of course, again, there comes the question of the chicken or egg. Could it be a simple association? Could it be that sleep hasn't got really any mechanistic association really with dementia? It's simply, of course, there's a common cause for both, because both are pretty much reliant on the brain. Now, we know that in Alzheimer's disease, we have 65% of the risk related to non-modifiable factors such as genetic factors, and 35% are modifiable, which impact on the risk at various stages in life. And the big question is, if sleep has an impact on the risk of dementia, then at what stage in life is going to exert its effect? And if could be considered maybe also harbinger, like an early biomarker of increased vulnerability for developing dementia, then how early those signals could emerge. Not very old meta-analysis looking at 18 longitudinal studies encompassing almost 250,000 patients they found a clear association between sleep problems, various types of sleep problems, and various forms of dementia. Interestingly, with insomnia being specifically associated with Alzheimer's disease. We can see that sleep disorder breathing, like OSAS, obstructive sleep apnea, is associated with all kinds of dementia disorders. But insomnia was specifically related to Alzheimer's disease, with an overall 50% increased risk in dementia associated with sleep problems. Later on, there was a nice longitudinal study published looking at sleep duration and the risk of dementia. And what they found, you can see here, well, we can already see the trend, a U-shaped association. However, based on the confidence intervals, we can also see that really it's short sleep in the midlife, in between 50s and 60s, predicts an increased risk of dementia, which can reach like 3-4-fold increase of dementia. And this is independent of other risk factors. Now, one of the strong risk factors of Alzheimer's type of dementia, late onset Alzheimer's dementia, is the ApoE polymorphism. Of course, we know that it has a very limited effect, but it's still the single strongest genetic factor. And there have been various studies trying to understand whether people who carry the RIS gene or in a heterozygous or homozygous manner could already present some sleep problems. And this is one of the studies which looked into healthy elderly people via polysomnography and also subjectively. And what they found, that subjectively there was no difference in sleep quality, whereas objectively those with the higher risk allele, they presented the worst sleep quality. And this has been reproduced in much larger sample sizes as well, clearly indicating there is almost like a dose-dependent effect as well, with the homozygous variant and carriers presenting worse sleep quality among dementia patients as well, of course, measured objectively, subjectively. And another study also looked at the association between sleep duration in interaction with the genetic risk factor. And they found that in the neutral genetic risk, there was an association between both short sleep and long sleep. Whereas interestingly, in the higher genetic risk factor group, there was an association with dementia only in the longer sleep. Now, this, of course, addresses an interesting question. How is it possible that long sleep can be detrimental for brain health? And well, of course, we can discuss it. I'm not going to ruin your chance to really come up with ideas why this could be. If there will be time at the end, maybe we can discuss this. I would be interested in your opinion. There has been a very interesting study I always like to cite, which was a 6-year follow-up study in old people, looking into their cognitive decline and increase the risk of dementia. And post-mortem, they also analyzed their brain tissue. So it was an amazing study. And what they found, they also looked at their sleep. And what they found that those older people who carried the RIS gene, they of course presented a steeper increase in the incidence of dementia and a steeper decline in cognition compared to those with the normal risk. But this difference in slope was pretty much modulated by the quality of sleep. And basically what they showed, that those who were poor sleepers, they showed a clear effect of the genotype on the risk of developing dementia, whereas that effect was almost absent among good sleepers, suggesting that sleep can modify the effect of the ApoE genotype on the risk of developing AD. Shift work is known to be detrimental for sleep quality, and it could increase all those negative health outcomes that are associated with worse sleep, chronically impaired sleep. And indeed, with respect to dementia, there's evidence showing that shift work increases the risk of dementia up to 36%. But then if this is associated with an increased genetic risk of Alzheimer's disease, this can go up to 4-fold increase in the heterozygous version. Now, the question emerges then, well, could it be that aging is really the factor that drives, of course, both the risk of dementia, because we know that it's the strongest risk factor for developing dementia, and there's also evidence, what I show here, that sleep quality and duration reduces with aging. What you can see here is that whereas in the early ages we have quite a bit of deep sleep, this light green color, and then we have a relatively even distribution between deep sleep, light sleep, and REM sleep. This is going to change a lot as we grow older, where we hardly will have any REM sleep and deep sleep left. And then if we talk about insomnia, which is the most common sleep problem, that's indeed pretty much increased with aging. As many as 50% of older adults complaining about difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep. And this prevalence is slightly higher in women compared to men. Now here you can see a hypnogram, which is a visual representation of the full night sleep dynamics. And what you can see here, that in a younger adult, there are some alternating cycles of deep sleep and then more superficial and REM sleep, and this just repeats throughout the night for several times. It lasts about 90 minutes, a sleep cycle. And this belongs to the normal structure of sleep. And we can also see that in older adults, it changes a lot. There's overall a decrease in the sleep duration, but then there's also a much more fragmented and discontinuous sleep dynamics. We luckily have evidence from relatively large sample size polysomnographic studies looking into age-dependent changes in sleep architecture. And you can clearly see here that wake after sleep onset, which is a pretty important indicator of sleep quality, gradually increases with aging. The arousal index, so the number of arousals per minute or hour, they increase with aging, and then of course total sleep time decreases as well. And here you can just see a much more granular representation of the various sleep vigilance stages and sleep stages, how they change over time. Now, if we really want to statistically represent the features of sleep, which are mostly affected by age, we can see from this very nice paper indicating that total sleep time, sleep efficiency, and most outcome measures related to slow wave or deep sleep are affected by age, and the number of awakenings as well. If we look into sleep disordered breathing, which is a major risk factor for various negative health outcomes, also including cognitive decline and excessive daytime sleepiness, we can see that as we grow older, the incidence of severe sleep apnea, so this is the AHI index, apnea hypopnea index, which is if it's over 5 is already it's unhealthy, but it's over 15 is pretty bad. And what you can see here, that particularly in men, there's a very high incidence of obstructive sleep apnea at an older age, which can obviously contribute to both sleep problems, daytime sleepiness, and cognitive decline. Okay. So, now, I mentioned several times the importance of slow wave sleep, which is the oscillatory activity of the brain, really securing the recovery processes, but also neuroplasticity. And if we compare the amount of slow wave sleep across various brain regions, we can see that there in normal and healthy younger adults, there's a clear gradient there along the anterior posterior axis, which with most of the slow wave sleep in the frontal brain region and then the least in the occipital brain region. And this is probably linked to the density of the synapses, the cortical thickness, and other parameters of the cortex. But what's striking here, if you look at the elderly group, which are the black horizontal bars, you don't see this gradient. Now, there's also time-dependent dynamics of slow wave sleep. We have most of slow wave sleep in the first part of the night and least in the last part of the night because of the homeostatic primacy of the slow wave sleep and the deep sleep, and that's also decreased in the older age group. And here just wanted to show you just a few examples, few studies indicating that amyloid beta burden, as visualized by PET imaging, is associated with this decline in slow wave sleep. Whereas here in a large sample size, you can see an example of this the association of the beta amyloid burden associated with nighttime sleep duration. So the longer is the sleep, the smaller is the burden. And it's not only, of course, we know that in terms of the neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease, it's not only amyloid burden, but also tau pathology is present. And there are quite a few studies trying to understand the association between sleep and both amyloid beta and tau burden as visualized quantified by PET imaging. And this is just an example from a nice study looking longitudinally. It's a retrospective analysis of sleep, self-reported sleep duration throughout from 40s to the 70s, as you can see here. And they associated the decrease or increase in sleep duration with the change in the cortical beta amyloid or tau burden. And you can see clearly an association, a negative association of the slope of the change in sleep duration with the beta amyloid burden, indicating that the decrease in sleep duration throughout aging was associated with a higher beta amyloid burden. These effects were much smaller for tau, but we can still see an effect here between the 50s and 60s, so indicating that where there was a reported decline in sleep duration from the age of 60 to the 60, that was associated to some extent with increased tau. Now, what's also interesting that sleep, the effect of aging on the brain, obviously, it's very multifactorial, affects lots of different parameters of the brain. And I just wanted to cite this study, which was AI-based approach analysis, where they integrated lots of different parameters of brain structure, and they applied a machine learning algorithm to see how sleep deprivation affected this feature of AI derived brain aging index. And what was interesting, that one night of total sleep deprivation increased the brain aging index by 1-2 years. But this was a reversible effect. So once they had a recovery night, it just reversed. And this increase in the brain aging index was associated also obviously with increasing sleepiness. So there was a functional causality between the two. Just wanted to highlight, without going into details, because circadian rhythmicity is a huge field with lots of implications for both aging and dementia. Just wanted to kind of summarize, based on this single figure, the reproducible finding that as we grow older, are the circadian amplitude declines. And the circadian system is very important for both the modulation of our waking vigilance, cognition, but also synaptic plasticity. So and there is of course a huge impact on our sleep timing, duration, and quality. So any change in the circadian system is going to have a broad and profound effect on all these functions. Now, as we grow older, our circadian rhythmicity becomes shallower, and it has been shown that this decrease in the amplitude and the precision of this rhythm can predict dementia. And finally, I wanted just to highlight this relatively recent field of research in the context of sleep and dementia. There are more and more studies indicating a role of locus coeruleus in aging and dementia. Of course, we know the locus coeruleus is pretty important, being located in the brainstem with broad projections across the brain. It's very important, the noradrenergic system, epinephrine system, and contributing to the arousal system, and also sleep-wake regulation. And there studies show that the locus coeruleus seems to be one of the earliest brain regions presenting AD type of pathology, like tau pathology as well, even in a prodromal stage. So it's really an area of interest in dementia research. And some of the studies try to understand if this could be linked to some extent to sleep. Now, I just highlighted this research. We try to understand whether the locus coeruleus integrity, I mean, here they measured volume, cell population, was associated with aging. And interestingly, it wasn't. So based on this data, there wasn't a clear association. That said, when they looked into the association in dementia patients with the Braak stages, there was a clear association indicating that the more severe was the dementia affecting the brain, the more, of course, the smaller was the LC population in the brainstem. In one of the studies, they tried to quantify sleep using actigraphy, which is a valid way to characterize circadian rest activity rhythmicity, and some of the non-parametric outcome measures like the intradaily variability is also a good estimate of sleep quality. The higher is this index is, the more fragmented is the 24-hour sleep-wake profile. Now, what they have shown here is that this baseline intradaily variability was an independent predictor of the LC integrity. Here they looked at the hypopigmentation. So in a way, it's a reduction in the cell population, and independent of some other risk factors. And there was also clear somewhat nonlinear association between the two. Just following up on this, they also looked into the cognition, and they clearly saw that those patients who had a lower hypopigmentation, they were the ones who also presented increased hypopigmentation, so decreased population of cells. Those were the ones who also presented a decline in cognition. And this intradaily variability as a measure of sleep quality was also associated with the hypopigmentation being higher in those who presented this reduction in the LC population. And there was an association, a really linear association between this sleep measure and the global cognitive decline. And based on this, well, they run some mediation analyses suggesting that the locus coeruleus has a contribution to cognitive decline, but this is also some extent mediated by the sleep problem. in another study, they looked again at LC in structural integrity. Here they used the 7 Tesla imaging, and they showed that there was a clear, there was an association between the number of awakenings as one of the sleep features thought to be interlinked with the LC function, which is in a way an inability to control or inhibit arousal. So this was associated various with the LC intensity in various parts of the LC. And what was also interesting in this particular study, that the association between the number of awakenings as a measure of sleep impairment during the night with the LC intensity was modulated by the tau burden in those patient groups. So where the tau burden was higher, then this association was stronger. Where there wasn't really much, this association was non-existent. So showing a three-way interaction between these factors. And finally, I just wanted to highlight one of the theoretical frameworks. I tried to understand the relationship between sleep-wake regulation with Alzheimer's pathophysiology as mediated to some extent by the locus ceruleus norepinephrine system deficit. But obviously, we could easily put here not only the locus ceruleus, because there are, of course, other parts of the brain that mediate sleep disorders, such as the hypothalamus. But the fact that LC presents early signs of affection in these conditions could make it really a new locus of action in this area. Here, I just wanted to highlight one aspect, because one could ask what could be the effect of locus ceruleus in the role of sleep in brain, while maintaining brain health. And one of the theories, and there's some evidence for that, that the lymphatic clearance of the brain, as mediated by sleep, is to a great extent modulated by the locus ceruleus. But as you can see, the arrows here, this is a bidirectional mechanism in most cases. So that's about the chicken or egg for today. I have to unfortunately disappoint Michael that when I planned this presentation, I knew that I won't have much time to go into our research now. We have some interesting research done in APOE genotype, and we have some evidence indicating that there is sleep deprivation impacts differentially those with a high burden as compared to the low APOE burden, or the APOE risk gene carriers with a lower recovery process or rebound of slow wave sleep in those who carry the higher risk of gene. But sorry, but I didn't include it for now, because that would be a slightly different and a more complicated story. So maybe next time. So with that, I would like just to thank you for your attention, and yeah, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for the overview. You're forgiven, Alpar. And I like that you invite yourself already for the next talk.
Sorry.
That's great. We have already a few questions in the chats, but I wanted to, you want to stop sharing, or you can go back maybe to the
or should I go back?
Okay. No, stop sharing for now, and then we can go back to the slides if there are questions.
Okay.
One question, just to kick us off, I guess it seems to me all a bit deterministic, doesn't it? So essentially, you're having shorter sleep and shorter deep sleep the older you get, and that's actually what you need to clear maybe your amyloid and tau more. So what can people do about it in a way?
So, sorry, the question is that if you have shorter sleep, then how can you increase your sleep duration?
Because if just shorter sleep is part of normal aging, your risk will just increase, won't it? Because it will just be compounding everything.
Yes, yes. Well, I suppose this is very similar to any other system in our organism, that it gets older, and then you have more and more inflammation, and there are very, I mean, your glucose metabolism changes, and there are all kind of risk factors impinging on the same outcome. In this case, on brain health, and sleep is one of those. And what we can do, we try to improve our diet to improve our metabolism. Then we try to be more physically active. And I believe the same thing is sleep. As long as we are aware that sleep is important, that already makes a difference. Because well, I mean, anecdotally, I can tell you examples when we talk with patients. Like a patient with Huntington's disease who had severe sleep problems. And obviously you would think immediately that, well, that can't be helped. It must be very organic. And then we discussed about the caffeine consumption. It turned out that this man consumed more than 7 caffeinated beverages per day, and then said, well, come on, let's start cutting back on that. And then next time, well, his sleep was significantly better indeed. And so that was just a small action to improve sleep. And there are lots of various ways sleep can be improved, starting from as simple thing as sleep hygiene practices to mindfulness, and then more cognitive behavior therapy. And there are emerging techniques as well which try to target directly sleep. Starting, well, a little bit more invasive ones, such as like light therapy, but there are also ways that electrically modulating sleep, or there's also special diets that could improve sleep. So overall, the conclusion is that sleep is not something totally out of our control, even with aging. And there's a very interesting phenotype, healthy sleep in aging there. And apparently, those people who maintain a healthy sleep with aging are indeed very much protected against lots of negative effects of aging on their
Right.
memory, for example.
I'm glad there's a bit of a positive message there. That's great. So let's go through the questions that we have first in the chat, maybe, or if anybody wants to come on as well. So Susan is asking, interesting point about the relationship of high BMI to poor sleep patterns. What is it about poor sleep that affects the BMI, please?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I like always to discuss that with students, and would have been interested in your opinion as well. But so obviously, if we are awake, the first thing is a behavioral factor, because I mean, we all experience that we are awake, then we feel we are more exposed to food stimuli. We feel hungry because during sleep, actually, appetite is suppressed. So behaviorally, we are just much more inclined to endorse food. We have the opportunity to do that as well. That's one thing. The other thing is that, as I said, there is a hormonal effect with the ghrelin and the leptin balances, where the ghrelin is downregulated during sleep, which obviously decreases the appetite. But then there's effect on through the HPA axis, which has been shown that short sleep and generally, I mean, chronic partial sleep deprivation upregulates to some extent the HPA axis, which has an impact on hormonal, like the glucocorticoid metabolism, which impacts on insulin, well, the effect of insulin on glucose use, and the tolerance increases, and the insulin sensitivity decreases, in a way mimicking the effect of type 2 diabetes. So sleep restriction actually can be a causal factor to type 2 diabetes. Well,
Great.
these are some of the effects.
Yeah, big topic. And Susan has another question. There seems to be a lot of menopausal women suffering night sweats, which results in poor sleep and brain and memory challenges. Is this also because of a lack of poor sleep or combination with hormone changes?
Well, I wish I knew the clear answer to that. It's a hot topic, and it's so the incidence of insomnia and sleep complaints is clearly increasing steeply at that age. But why exactly that happens, I don't think we know that. Obviously, the hormonal changes should be the leading factors, because that's causing most of the symptoms in terms of also well, the emotional ones and the temperature related modulations, because the core body temperature and the dynamics of the core body temperature throughout the night is a pretty critical factor for sleep initiation and sleep need dissipation, and those change during menopause. So I would like to say that I don't think I know, and it's not really know the factor what drives that, but it's clearly there is a causal. It seems to be a causal association between physiological factors affecting menopause or triggering menopause and associated sleep problems. It's certainly not on the other way around. We don't think there's a bidirectional link there.
Great. And Annalise is asking, what is the impact of prescribed sleeping tablets on people who currently have poor sleep?
Well, sleeping tablets are multiple type. Most commonly, what we call sedatives, and they act on a certain receptor, which increases well, sleep consolidation to some extent, but unfortunately, it comes with the price of decreasing slow wave sleeps. These are the so-called Z drugs, zolapram, zopiclone, zolpidem, and they also have serious side effects, particularly related to second-day effects, hangover effects, increased falls risk. Of course, there are the benzodiazepines, which are quite effective, but then they can trigger tolerance and addiction. And then there's one of the new promising compound is related to orexin control, so affecting the double orexin antagonist like the suvorexan, which has been shown to increase sleep consolidation without affecting too much the normal sleep physiological dynamics. So these are relatively new promising compounds.
So yeah, lots of different sleep medication out there. And then Susan had another question asking if you could explain again the relationship between hypopigmentation with dementia. I guess hypopigmentation for the locus coeruleus, that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So well, I'm not a neuroanatomist, but all these outcome measures are related to the integrity of the locus coeruleus, which is a tiny structure, is of up to, I think, 2 millimeters or so in the brainstem, and they are it's pretty important for overall function of the brain, and also for sleep regulation and general arousal and daytime vigilance. And the idea is that, yeah, I think that's a very important point I didn't make, that it's not only the locus coeruleus that can affect sleep, but there's evidence showing that full sleep restriction in animals can atrophy the LC in a relatively short time in an irreversible manner. So it means that if we have a sleep disorder, that we don't sleep enough, that's going to already affect our vigilance system, as represented here by the LC, and which of course is going to affect many more functions in our brain, also affecting back and impinging back on sleep regulation. Was this the question addressed?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a much more complex. So Susan, if you're more interested, I think you need to read up on it or rewatch maybe the talk. Do we have any other questions? If anybody wants to type in a question or come on video and ask your question. Or everybody's feeling sleepy.
Well, sorry about that.
No, not your fault, not your fault. Full attention. There's a lot of information. I think that's great. I think then I just want to say, Dan, can you put in our email address into the chat again? So if you have any questions or anything, or you want to follow up, or you want to watch the recording and our website as well. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And you also put already in the next Dementia Open Forum, so the 27th of June at 2 p.m. So just to say thank you again to Alpar. I think that was great. Just an overview. It was perfect for me.
Yeah.
So I don't have to read the literature myself. I can be lazy. So thank you for summarizing all of this. And good to see you all, and hope to see you the next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.